Welcome to Bookish Mind, Season 3, Episode 8, where we explore how emotional and social intelligence quietly shape every conversation, connection, and community we build. Welcome to the deep dive. We've got a stack of material today, pulling quite a bit from Daniel Goleman's work, and it all revolves around emotional and social intelligence and, well, just how much it impacts everything. Our mission to really dig into these sources and pull out the most important insights for you.
That's right. We tend to talk a lot about IQ, being book smart, but these sources really drive home that how effective you are in the real world, well, it's deeply connected to these other skills. Things like understanding yourself, understanding other people, getting a handle on your feelings, navigating relationships. It's about those subtle, really powerful forces shaping our interactions, sure, but also how we function in groups, how communities get built, really.
It feels like the hidden wiring of our social lives. Okay, let's get into it. The sources start by looking at just how incredibly early these skills pop up. There's this amazing story about a little boy, Jay, just 2.5 years old. His older brother, Len, who's 5, is having a total meltdown after a fight over Legos. Len even bit Jay. But little Jay, instead of, hitting back or just crying, he actually tries to soothe his big brother.
It's pretty stunning, isn't it, for a kid that young? Jay shows this surprising sophistication in trying to manage someone else's big feelings. And he doesn't just try one thing.
No.
The sources lay out this whole sequence. He starts with a simple plea, like, please don't cry. Then he runs to get their mom involved. He tries patting Len's back, offering to help fix the Legos, distracting him with a toy car.
And even tries a little threat, mimicking his mom.
Exactly. It's like he's reaching into this toolkit of strategies he's seen used on him.
Right, things that have worked to calm him down before.
Precisely, and that really highlights a key point from the material. This basic ability to grasp how someone else feels empathy, right? And then having the drive and sort of the repertoire to act in a way that might change that feeling. That's just fundamental for relationships. But, and this is crucial, the sources make it clear that the very same skill, knowing how someone feels, could be used to soothe, like Jay did, or it could be used to tease, to torment. The skill itself isn't good or bad.
Ah, so it's about the intention behind it and maybe other skills you have alongside it.
Exactly that. And you can't really effectively manage someone else's emotions if you haven't got some foundational skills yourself. The sources point out that things like self-management, being able to, calm your own anger or distress first, and empathy, they really start kicking in around age 2.
2 years old, wow.
Yeah, that's when you might see a toddler starting to wait a bit, maybe argue with words instead of just, hitting or melting down immediately. With Jay, his empathy for Len seems to be the engine driving all those soothing attempts.
So managing others starts with managing yourself, plus that ability to feel with them.
Yes, and those two things are the absolute bedrock for what we think of as people skills or social competence. These are the skills that make you effective when dealing with other people, period. The sources are quite blunt. If you're lacking here, even if you're incredibly bright intellectually, you can come across as arrogant or insensitive, just socially clumsy.
Right, you see that sometimes. Brilliant people who just rub others the wrong way.
Exactly. And they often stumble into the same interpersonal problems again and again. But if you have strong social skills, you navigate situations more smoothly, you can shape interactions in a positive way, inspire people, build solid relationships, persuade, influence, you just make people feel comfortable. These skills really do shape the health of our communities.
It really drives home that book smarts and people smarts are two different things. And a big part of people smarts is how we actually show our own feelings.
Absolutely. The sources spend a good chunk of time on this, the skill of expressing your feelings in a way that, well, works socially. This brings us to display rules.
Display rules.
Yeah, they're like the unwritten rules of society, the cultural agreements about which feelings are okay to show, how much, and in what situations. And as you'd expect, these rules can be wildly different from culture to culture.
That Japanese student example was really telling.
It's a perfect illustration. When the students watched this upsetting film alone, their faces clearly showed distress. But when someone in authority was in the room, poof, their faces went neutral, totally masking what they were feeling inside.
So they were minimizing the emotion.
Exactly. That's one basic display rule. Others include exaggerating. Think of a kid really hamming up how sad they are to get attention, or even substituting one feeling for another. Like in some Asian cultures, showing open anger or disappointment might be considered impolite, so someone might smile instead.
So emotional intelligence involves knowing these rules and knowing when and how to use them.
You got it. It's all about reading the social context. And we start learning these rules incredibly early. Some of it's explicit, like a parent saying, just smile and say thank you for that awful gift from Aunt Mildred.
Huh? Yeah. We've all been there.
But the sources stress that the most powerful learning happens through modeling. If that parent tells you to say thank you, but their voice is tight and annoyed, you're probably going to pick up on the tone more than the words. You'll give that stiff, awkward thank you.
The feeling behind the words is louder.
Often, yes, because how we display our emotions has this immediate, usually unconscious effect on everyone around us. Display rules help us manage that impact. Follow them well, and interactions tend to go smoothly. Mess them up, and, as the sources put it, you can foment emotional havoc, make people really uncomfortable or confused. Actors, of course, are masters of this, but we're all doing it constantly.
And these emotions we're displaying, they don't just get seen, they actually spread, right? We can catch moods from each other.
Oh, absolutely. This is a huge concept in the sources, the idea that emotions are contagious, almost like a social virus. That story about the Vietnamese monks walking calmly through a firefight and their calmness actually pacifying the soldiers, that's an extreme, almost legendary example.
It's incredible to think about. Their inner state literally changing the environment.
It shows the potential power, doesn't it? But most emotional contagion is way more subtle. It's that subterranean economy of the psyche the sources talk about, happening all the time, in every little interaction. You know how a brief exchange with a grumpy cashier can leave you feeling vaguely irritated?
Yeah, or a cheerful barista can give you a little lift.
Exactly. We're constantly sending and receiving these emotional signals, often completely unaware. And being socially skilled, according to this material, involves getting better at managing the signals we send out. People who have a knack for helping others feel better, for soothing distress, they're incredibly valuable. The sources say we're all part of each other's toolkit for emotional change.
I like that, a toolkit for emotional change.
Isn't that good? And they mention an experiment fascinating where just putting an emotionally expressive person in a room with a totally deadpan person sitting in silence resulted in the deadpan person's mood shifting to match the expressive one.
Without even talking. How does that work?
The leading theory is something called motor mimicry. Basically, we unconsciously and super rapidly imitate the tiny nonverbal cues of people around us. Their facial expressions, their posture, gestures, tone of voice, even if we aren't talking.
A little muscle movement?
Tiny ones, yeah. And this physical imitation seems to actually trigger the corresponding feeling inside us. It happens in milliseconds. Studies using sensors on facial muscles show we start mirroring expressions almost instantly upon seeing them.
So we copy their face, and then we start to feel what their face is showing.
In a subtle way, yes. It's like our body helps us understand by simulating the feeling. And this mood transfer usually flows from the person who's more emotionally expressive, or interestingly, the person who has more power or status in that interaction, though some people just seem more naturally tuned in, more susceptible to catching moods.
And this mirroring leads to what the sources call mood synchrony.
Right, or attunement. It's like the adult version of that mother-infant dance where they respond to each other's rhythms. When adults are connecting well, when there's rapport, you often see their bodies moving in sync unconsciously.
Like nodding at the same time or shifting in their seats together.
Exactly, little things like that.
Yeah.
Rocking in swivel chairs at the same rhythm. And studies show this isn't just fluff. Higher physical synchrony between depressed women and their partners meant the partners were more likely to catch the low mood. But between teachers and students, more synchrony correlated with more positive feelings in the classroom. Generally, high synchrony means people are clicking, they like each other.
And you can really feel when it's not happening, that awkward, out-of-sync feeling.
Oh, definitely. That clunky interaction where nothing seems to flow smoothly, that's often a sign of low emotional attunement. So being able to tune into others' moods or even gently guide the emotional tone of an interaction yourself, that's core to interpersonal effectiveness. People who struggle with this often leave others feeling vaguely uncomfortable, even if they can't put their finger on why.
And setting the emotional tone.
Yeah.
It's a kind of leadership, almost, like that Zeitgeber idea.
That's the term, yeah. German for time giver, like how sunlight sets our body clock. The person with more emotional energy or presence or just plain old power can often set the emotional tempo for everyone else. They entrain the others. Think of really charismatic leaders, speakers, performers. They often draw the audience into their emotional state. It's a fundamental way we influence each other.
So much going on under the surface. Okay, let's look at social intelligence more broadly. The sources break it down into components, right? Using work from Hatch and Gardner. And they start with that simple story of Roger rubbing his own knee when his friend Reggie falls and hurts his.
Yeah, Roger's little empathetic mirror reaction points to one of the key pieces.
Mm.
The sources outline four main components of what they call interpersonal intelligence. First is organizing groups, that's the leader's skill, coordinating people. Second, negotiating solutions, the mediator's knack for bridging gaps and resolving conflict. Third is personal connection. This is Roger's strength. That ability to tune in, respond with empathy, build rapport, it's the real art of relationship.
Makes sense.
And fourth is social analysis, being able to read people, understand their feelings, motives, concerns. This often leads to that easy intimacy, that feeling of being understood.
Those all together, and it sounds like you get charm, social grace, charisma.
Pretty much. People strong in these areas just seem to navigate the social world more easily. They connect, they read the room, they lead well, handle disagreements smoothly. They're often just, well, emotionally nourishing to be around. And these often build on other EI skills, like self-monitoring, being aware of how you're coming across and adjusting.
But there's a potential dark side too, isn't there? The sources mentioned social chameleons.
Right. This draws on Mark Snyder's work. It describes people who are brilliant at the social skills part, reading others, making a great impression, but maybe they're not so tuned into their own inner world, their own feelings and values.
So they change depending on who they're with.
Exactly. They're masters of impression management. Their main goal might be to be liked, so they adapt their persona, their opinions, even their behavior to fit what they think others want. Think of Woody Allen's Zelig character, who literally changed his appearance to blend in. These folks do it socially and emotionally.
Which means they might be popular, but maybe don't have many deep, stable relationships.
That's often the trade-off, according to the sources. They might lack that core authenticity. This is contrasted with emotional integrity, which is about balancing those social skills with being true to yourself, acting from your own values, even if it rocks the boat sometimes. It's having both the social radar and a strong inner compass.
That balance sounds crucial. Because the flip side, when these skills are really underdeveloped, the impact can be huge. That story about Cecil was quite sad.
Yeah, Cecil. Intellectually gifted, expert in languages, but described as socially paralyzed. Awkward in basic conversation, terrified of saying the wrong thing, laughing at the wrong times. It seemed like he just never picked up on the fundamental, unspoken rules of interaction.
Like basic politeness, turn-taking in conversation, expressing thanks.
Exactly. The sources call these the rudiments of social civility, part of that interaction synchrony. When someone consistently misses these cues, even if they don't mean to, it just makes others uncomfortable. It creates static. It's not just about manners. It's about failing to connect on that basic nonverbal emotional level. And that really hurts your ability to form relationships and be part of a community.
And they mentioned a specific term for difficulty with nonverbal cues.
Dyssemia. It's framed as a kind of learning disability, but for nonverbal messages. Trouble with personal space, reading facial expressions or body language, or maybe their tone of voice, their prosody doesn't match their words. They might sound angry when they're not, or flat when they're excited.
And for kids dealing with this,
it's incredibly tough. They often get labeled weird or strange. Peers might avoid them or reject them outright unless they manage to become bullies sometimes. They just don't get the cues, or they send the wrong ones, and then they get negative reactions they don't understand. It leads to frustration, confusion, feeling powerless, sometimes depression or apathy.
wow.
And it hits them in school, too. Classrooms are social places. If you can't read the teacher's cues, or you're constantly anxious about peer interactions, it really interferes with learning. Often, these kids perform worse academically than you'd expect based on their IQ scores alone.
It really shows how vital these skills are for navigating almost every part of life. The sources pinpoint one specific moment as being really telling for kids' social skills. Trying to join a group that's already playing.
Yeah, they call it perilous and highly diagnostic. You can imagine the scene, right? Kids are playing, a new kid approaches, and sometimes they get hit with stuff like, you can't play, or we hate you today. Totally. And how kids handle this moment says a lot. The sources contrast the approaches of kinked who are generally popular versus those who aren't. The less popular kids often barge in, try to take over, criticize the game, or just disagree. They're trying to assert themselves maybe, but it usually backfires. They get ignored or pushed away.
So what do the popular kids do differently?
They hang back first. They watch. They figure out what's going on, the frame of reference, the sources call it. What's the game? Who's doing what? Then they ease in gently. Maybe they start doing what the other kids are doing, showing they get it. They wait for a signal, some kind of acceptance before they try to initiate anything new.
It's about respecting the existing dynamic first, like Roger again, right?
Yep.
Checking in about the helicopter.
Exactly. His success came from observing, then imitating, then talking, then joining fully. And that question, are you in a helicopter? Wasn't just making conversation. It showed he was paying attention to the other kids' imaginative play, validating their frame of reference. That sensitivity is key to making the connection stick.
Okay, so we've seen how these skills start, how we display emotions, how moods spread, the key components, the problems when they're missing, and navigating tricky moments like joining a group. Let's wrap up with that incredible example of mastery dealing with intense anger.
Ah, yes, the story of Terry Dobson on the train in Tokyo, a keto expert facing this big, drunk, enraged laborer who seemed ready to explode. Terry's Aikido wasn't about fighting, it was about reconciliation, but he was mentally prepping for a physical confrontation to protect people.
But then the old man stepped in.
Yes,
Yeah.
this elderly Japanese man, and his approach is presented as just, well, emotional brilliance in action. He didn't challenge the drunk. He came across as completely non-threatening, almost cheerful. He used this warm, inviting tone, beckoned the guy over like an old friend.
And he didn't focus on the anger.
Not directly. He asked warmly, "What you been drinking?" Then immediately found common ground. "Oh, sick. I love sick too." He skillfully shifted the focus away from the rage towards something relatable, calming, talking about his own wife, his garden, his persimmon tree.
And just talking about normal life stuff diffused the situation.
Completely changed the energy. The sources describe the drunk's face softening, his hands unclenching, his voice losing its edge. The old man's empathy, his gentle questions about the man's own life, allowed the underlying sadness and pain, the real source of the anger, to surface. The guy ended up sobbing, sharing his troubles, and finding comfort with this complete stranger. That's what the sources mean by emotional brilliance, using understanding and skill to transform conflict into connection.
Wow, that's powerful. So from a toddler trying to comfort his brother to an old man calming a violent drunk, these sources really map out the incredible landscape of emotional and social intelligence.
They really do. They show how these skills, which aren't the same as IQ and are often learned very early, are just fundamental to connecting with people, communicating effectively, handling conflict, influencing situations positively. They really are, as we said at the start, shaping every conversation, connection, and community.
And digging into this stuff, it doesn't just help us understand other people better, does it? It shines a light on ourselves, too. How we react, how others might see us, maybe where we could grow a bit in the social sphere.
Absolutely. It makes you more aware of that constant, subtle, emotional exchange happening all around us. And it suggests that even small steps trying to manage your own reactions a bit better, offering a moment of real empathy, paying closer attention to body language, or just trying to sync up with someone's mood a little, these can make a real difference in how your interactions go.
So maybe a little experiment for you listening. In your next few conversations today or tomorrow, just try to notice that emotional undercurrent. Can you spot who might be setting the emotional tone, the Zeitgeber? Can you see those little moments of synchrony or maybe awkwardness where it's lacking? And what happens if you consciously try to tune in a bit more or maybe gently shift a tense moment like that old man did? Just observing might give you some really interesting insights into the invisible forces shaping your own social world.